Hello class and welcome to week 8. First of all, I want to extend a happy Father's Day belatedly to the fathers that we have in our classroom. Second of all, I wanted to talk with you about the number of readings that you have to do this week. So this week you're going to be reading about personality disorders, elimination disorders, somatic symptom and related disorders, and then neurodevelopmental disorders. And so the way your assignments are set up, you have a journal entry that you're going to be talking about the personality disorders, and then you have a discussion that you're going to be sort of comparing and contrasting personality disorders with some of these other disorders or diagnoses that we see in children. Sort of a fun fact, almost every big cluster that's listed down here at the bottom I treated and I saw when I was in clinical practice, and that's related to the image that's in your announcements, and I'll get to that in just a second. But to keep this as brief as I can and not go off on a tangent like I did last week, there's a big school of thought of individuals who don't think that personality disorders deserve the same clinical focus or clinical attention as, the things like mood disorder or anxiety disorders. These could be learned behaviors. This is what these individuals think in terms of people who don't think that personality disorders deserve the same clinical attention. In fact, in the old DSM, the DSM-4 TR, which stands for text revision, there was a multi-axial system, and personality disorders were actually diagnosed on axis 2. On axis 1, we would have our diagnoses, our disorders that were of clinical focus, including autism and so some of the neurodevelopmental disorders that you'll learn about this week. And then on axis 2, we'd have the personality disorders. And even in practice today, you might find some old heads who talk about people who are axis 2. And that's just old code language for personality disorders. And your DSM clusters them in 3 groups. You have your cluster A personality disorders, you have your cluster B and cluster C. Your cluster A are your odd eccentric types, your cluster B are your erratic, dramatic, and emotional types, and then cluster C are your anxious and fearful. And so personality disorders can be very tricky in therapy and in treatment because they kind of come with a bad rep in terms of being untreatable, because if you think about someone's personality, it's an enduring pattern over time. And so how do you change someone's personality? How do you change sort of someone's characterological self? And so you have individuals who sort of don't even think it merits attention, and then you have people who are very much invested in helping people to maintain a healthier way of functioning. So one of those such people is Marsha Linehan. This is her book. You can't see the glare. She has written one of the seminal texts for treating borderline personality disorder. This is a skills manual that I used in practice. And she uses what's called dialectical behavior therapy. Now, you didn't learn about this in your theories class, but DBT is the treatment modality for individuals with borderline personality disorder, and it's also been shown as efficacious in other sort of diagnoses that we've learned about thus far. But with DBT, you learn about sort of holding 2 opposing ideas at the same time. And if you have any experience with borderline personality disorder, that's one of those cluster B, emotional, erratic, dramatic personality disorders. These are individuals who sort of have an extreme, intense love for you one day, or even within a 10-minute time frame, and then there's an extreme hate. And so, and I cannot underscore the extremity, the level of anger, the level of rage that you sometimes see with individuals with borderline personality disorder. Also, sort of some of the self-mutilation. It's a very difficult diagnosis to treat, but that doesn't mean it's a life sentence. I've had clients with borderline personality disorder, and in fact, the first client that I ever worked with, it wasn't diagnosed yet, and I just remember sitting in session with her. And when she left from the session with me, and I mean, she was just throwing praise my way, but at the same time, her problems were so terrible and so insurmountable, and no one but me could help her. When she left the session, I was so drained. I felt like someone had gone into my chest and just taken all the life out of me. And I'm not being dramatic. So when I get that feeling, and in some of your video feedbacks or some of your papers, I'm encouraging you all, if you have sort of bodily feelings when you're working in certain areas, pay attention to that, because it can inform you, hey, this might be what's going on. And so when I'm working with an individual and I sort of get that feeling where it's like a force is pulling something out of me, I'm going to start paying attention and thinking about maybe this is going on. And as it pertains to borderline personality disorder, Marsha Linehan uses DBT, and so one of the modules we talk about the wise mind versus the emotional mind. And so in the image that you see, I was working with a young lady, a client, who's right on the precipice. So she was like 17. And so your DSM will talk about when personality disorders can be diagnosed or given to an individual. But she was engaging in some of those behaviors. If there was a checklist, and so the self-harm, as you see in the quote, and this is actually a quote that I had from the client in terms of her banging her head against the wall to the point where she would hurt herself, wanting to be dead, saying mean things to her mother, etc., but being extremely dramatic. I mean, in a very good way. She was like the best actress at her school. And so we tried to talk about using her wise mind and tried to talk about, so holding two things at once. And the two things at once is that, I hate everybody, but at the same time, some people are nice to me. And so it's holding these two opposing ideas at once and living through the discomfort of that. And so dialectical behavior therapy is a wonderful treatment modality, and I'm just going on and on. The second thing you see is actually something I did with another client, and he had ADHD combined type. And something funny about the sections that you're reading this week is I've treated probably an individual in each and every one of these, and most of them were children. And so we used, and I have this handout in PDF form. I can email it to you guys, but I don't know if you can see. This is a dog. It's a therapy assistant dog. And down here, there's a map or legend, and you're supposed to, so different parts of the body represent different things, and then the different colors represent different emotions. And his whole dog was red. His diagnosis was ADHD combined type, and some people always say, well, I have ADHD, well, I'm so ADHD. But when you talk to a parent of a child who has ADHD, they always tell you, and this is what my clients tell me, the Walmart test. Can you take your child to Walmart and not have a terrible shopping experience? Be it they're running through the store, hiding under the clothes and all kinds of things. And so, again, I think in our society, we have a way of sort of diagnosing ourselves, or, oh, she's so bipolar. And oftentimes when someone is calling someone bipolar, by the way, they really are actually highlighting some borderline personality traits in terms of this extreme mood swings. But I digress. So these are your these are your lessons for the week. I can send you the therapy dog if you would like. I'm going to start sending you all more resources. And when I taught this class in a ground program, I actually created a test, a multiple choice test. And the reason why this is important is because as you all begin to prepare to get out of here eventually and sit for your licensure exam is going to be a series of multiple choice questions, and some of them have several different components. And so being able to recognize key symptoms and diagnosing an individual is going to be of very extreme importance to you. So I planned, I think in week 10, because next week, week 9, all of your projects are due, but in week 10, I do plan to put in the classroom the multiple choice test, and you can take that at your leisure. And if you send it back to me, I'll grade it for you, just so you can see if you can recognize some of the major symptoms, and sort of have an idea of where you might be going inside the DSM. But these are your assignments for the week. Let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget your final projects are due next week. Thanks.